Hi and welcome. I'm AnewZ and you are watching Context. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy promised new legislation to strengthen rule of law following the first major anti-government protests since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion. Demonstrators gathered in several Ukrainian cities after Zelenskyy signed a bill into law on late Tuesday, effectively weakening the two independent anti-corruption bodies. Critics say the law places the offices under government control, while Zelenskyy defended the move, saying they will continue to operate but without Russian influence. Kyiv's European allies, including Germany and France, voiced concerns over the law, saying it might hinder the fight against corruption and prove to be an obstacle on Ukraine's path to EU membership. In the meantime, Russia and Ukraine exchanged fresh drone strikes following Wednesday's brief third round of peace talks in Istanbul. On the controversial reform, its implications on Kyiv's road to Brussels, as well as domestic and international backlash, we're talking with Julia O'Connell of the Dignitas Fund, coming to us from New York, and political analyst Anna Evans joining us from Lisbon. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with the law itself. Activists are saying it strips independence from the anti-corruption bodies, while the government is defending the bill, saying that it weeds out Russian influence. Julia, what do you make of the reform and the very fact it was done in wartime?
First, let me just say that a couple days ago when I learned, I was very upset, very disappointed, like many Ukrainians. I did a little bit of research, and that research shows that, for example, in the United States, FBI that is dealing with all kinds of corruption, unlike in Ukraine where we have NABU that investigate top corruption, elite corruption, and SAP that prosecute elite corruption. So that's all under the FBI umbrella in the United States. And its reports, FBI reports to the Attorney General, which is similar to Prosecutor General in Ukraine, and ultimately to President. So to say that this structure is completely unheard of is not. Many countries do have structure where the agencies that investigate and prosecute corruption do report that Attorney General or Prosecutor General. That being said, I believe the communication to Ukrainian people and the timing to do that, it was completely wrong. And the reason why it's wrong, that Ukrainians are extremely sensitive right now to any kind of diminishing the people's power or increasing the government power, because the Ukrainians fight for democracy, for freedom. And any time that it looks like it's being diminished, they do protest, they take it to the streets because it's a democracy. But again, the timing and the message and the poorly communicated message, that's caused this like a big outlash on the streets.
Anna, what are your thoughts on the law that critics say effectively puts the anti-corruption bodies under government control?
Well, I believe that what my colleague has said sums up a lot of what is at stake here. And so what is the problem? The problem is that when we discuss structures of governance, meaning when we discuss who is accountable to whom and in what terms, within a certain institution, in this case an institution that is responsible, or two institutions that are responsible for overseeing any possible instances of corruption within public administration and within the higher levels of government, what we are asking and discussing is whether this system of governance, this system of accountability of who has power over whom, whether this means that the capacity of these institutions to perform their role is hindered. So the problem here is whether by making the institutions responsive to the general attorney means that these institutions lose their capacity to perform and to detect high-level corruption within the apparatus, within the closest people to Zelensky and within the high echelons of the public administration and governments. So I think this is the issue. Is this new model of governance, institutional governance, conducive to less performative capacity by those who are responsible for detecting and sanctioning, penalizing corruption? Is this the case? And apparently, many international actors are concerned that, unfortunately, it might be the case.
We will get to the international
I think this is the issue.
In just a minute. Yulia, you touched upon the people coming out to the street to express their disappointment, their disagreement with the reform. How much did this reform have to provoke some feelings to see the first serious protests since Russia's full-scale invasion?
Definitely provoked, definitely, because it was explosion not only on Facebook, it was explosion on the streets, and it's very interesting to know that it's a lot of young people who came out, a lot of 18 plus, 18, through 25, 26, those who are below the conscription age, and they were thanked by many soldiers from the front line, saying that, look, we are here at the front line. We actually can step up and voice our opinions on the street when we see things are not happening the way that democratically should be. But you are having our back. And to say that these young people, they were children during the Revolution of Dignity. They were not born during Orange Revolution of 2004. So these are young people who carry the same kind of values, and was, thousands and thousands of them. And the thing is that Ukrainian communities, Ukrainian grassroots communities are very much connected and are very easy to communicate between each other and take it to the street. It just proves again that Ukraine is democracy, is maybe young democracy, but it's definitely a democratic process that working their way out. Unlike, for example, Russia, where you can go with a piece of paper, clean piece of paper, right? And you will be taken to the police office. So yeah, this is just proving again and again, generation after generation, that the power belongs to the people, not to the government. And the government cannot do whatever they please in a short period of time without communicating the message to the people. If they wanted to, chase this Russian infiltration agencies, that had to be communicated. They do have an argument of that, and people do understand. But the argument that you don't restructure, you don't change architecture in the middle of the war, when it looks like it could be the, usurpation of the power, even if government had good intentions, they had to communicate that.
Anna, let's go to these international reactions that you've mentioned. Now, Ukraine's European backers expressed concern over the law. EU's enlargement commissioner called it a serious step back. Besides the EU path, Anna, do you see this move having implications on Kyiv's relations with individual European allies as well?
Well, it certainly will have implications with major allies, and they've already started making comments, namely France, Germany. These are countries that are so important in terms of the alliance of the willing, and these countries are very worried. And I would say that this is a really very delicate moment because we do remember that corruption in Ukraine and corruption within the judicial system and within public administration have been major issues with regard to the possible path towards integration in the European Union. And so these two agencies that are at stake now were created precisely with a view to bringing the country closer to European standards with regard to corruption. And, if we go back ever since, the fall of the Soviet Union, this has been a problem that has come up again and again, either with the oligarchs or with issues of elections that were manipulated and with a lot of money involved, and or with the judicial system, as I started by saying, with verdicts that were not regarded independent, public administration, even in the military sphere, for all, the billions and billions of help that have been provided to the country. One of the major concerns for European allies and for the United States as well is whether the money is reaching its goals and if and how much of it is being wasted, on the way to its goals, amidst corruption. And this is really a very serious issue because some of you might remember that in the Brussels hallways, not too long before the war started, before Russia invaded Ukraine in this second wave, so in the last 3.5 years, if one would ask Brussels, Brussels administrative apparatuses, what they thought about Ukraine joining the European Union, everybody would say, but hey, this is a country where there are really big problems of corruption, and that's one of the great items that does not meet the qualifications and conditions to join the European Union. And so I would say this is a really delicate problem which might jeopardize a lot of work that has been done, in the past 3.5 years towards, assisting the country and bringing the country to Europe. In recent surveys, the ranking of corruption of the country has improved, but it is still very low in international terms. And again, this is a problem considering, the relationships and the possibility of a European membership in the future.
Following the backlash, Zelensky has promised some new legislation, saying he heard what the public is saying at a meeting with heads of law enforcement and anti-corruption agencies, as well as the prosecutor general. He announced a joint action plan to solve the problem within the next 2 weeks. Julia, would you say that would be enough to quell the protests?
It's a good start. President Zelensky pledged that the bill that's going to be new bill within 2 weeks, that he actually pledged that they would restore the independence of these organs. Right now, it has to be a very close communications between government, between Zelensky and his administration and Ukrainian people to calm things down. It's been said that the prosecution organ was not effective enough, so maybe many cases should be brought up into the public eyes to see where government and maybe these organs were not effective and what problems they had between each other. So it's a lot of explanations that would have to be made, a lot of conversations that would have to be happening within the next 2 weeks to calm people down, not only calm to people down. It's the major and most important part, to communicate to people, to explain what was happening and how they're going to, and how it has to be addressed. But the good thing, it's we see the democratic process. We see that democracy is working their way out. We see the response that, even though everybody is going to make mistakes, and our government and Ukrainian government could make mistakes. It's how they approach, how they deal with that mistake, and it looks like it's being dealt with through democratic processes.
Anna, what are your thoughts on Zelensky's promise of a plan within 2 weeks? Does it have enough weight to calm concern among Kyiv's European allies?
Right. I think I agree with what Yulia has said. And also, we need to be a bit rational when analyzing, the relationships with allies. Because after so much investment, and so much support, there is only so far the allies would go to penalize internal decisions and choices. I mean, there are these voices of alert. Hey, be careful. You might be going on a red line. But I don't think that it is in anybody's interest at this point in terms of external allies to create more problems than there already are. Whatever President Zelensky does, somehow will end up, in a consensual manner with the allies. But there's one thing that really worries me, which is it is a very dangerous situation to have open political dissent during war, because many people have lost their lives. People are paying with their blood, and they are paying with their living and their prosperity, which are gone. And so, paying with blood and prosperity and well-being does not allow for instances where the population mistrusts and suspects that those in higher positions are making high profits out of, their blood prices. And in my opinion as an analyst, if I was in President Zelensky's shoes, I would be extremely preoccupied at this point, mostly with my internal audience and, not necessarily with my allies, because I don't think the allies will stop supporting the regime. It's too much investment, too much sunk costs, and I don't think that's at all on the table. But I would be very preoccupied with the population and what this means in terms of political legitimacy at a time of war.
Well, as all of this is happening, the war rages on. Let's turn to the Istanbul talks for a minute. The third round we saw in Istanbul lasted just 40 minutes. There was no breakthrough regarding a ceasefire or a meeting between Russian and Ukrainian presidents, but the sides agreed on more prisoner swaps. Yulia, your thoughts?
I wouldn't expect that any kind of breakthrough or even any kind of real steps would be done. The exchange of prisoners, it's, Russia is stalling this kind of process. They are buying time. It's been said many times, and what they're doing, and when they exchange the prisoners, it's kind of to show that they are doing something. So to basically show the President Trump as if they are willing to move forward. So it's exchanging prisoners is great. It's like we love every single Ukrainian who comes back on Ukrainian land, but in terms of coming closer to the ceasefire or peace negotiations or any of that, it's not productive. It's good to have any kind of outcome. Again, the prisoners that were coming home is phenomenal for the family, but in terms of on the big picture, Putin is doing all the old KGB tricks, delaying, stalling time, and not making any real progresses, because any real progress would be immediately seen on the sky of in Ukrainian sky every day Shahed drones in the hundreds flying. They are flying higher. They are flying at the different patterns now. They are flying so in a way that they surround the city at much higher level at 3 kilometers versus 2 or 1.5 it used to be, and then bombard the city all at the same time. So all of this, whatever you talk as a talk, but the actions show that he is not there to stop the war, or it's not there to, make it any easier for not only for frontline, but for Ukrainian civilians, for the kids, at the, elderlies who horrified at this point to live through every night. So this is very, very classic Putin's KGB tactics.
Well, it seems that all three rounds of talks we saw lacked serious or negotiations in good faith on a ceasefire that Kyiv and its allies have been pushing for. Anna, what would you say it would take for both sides to actually want and arrange a truce?
Well, Andy, we know from the history of international relations and the history of conflicts that one needs to convince both sides that they will have much more to win if they stop the conflict now. Meaning, either we have a military victory of one side over the other, or if there is no outright victory and it needs to be via diplomatic means, which is the case here, then we need to convince both of the parties that in their calculations they will gain much more now if they stop than if they keep fighting. And it is this calculation that is very complex, because basically at war, I know this sounds very, very sad and dramatic, but the reality is that there is a constant calculus of costs and possible gains. So one would have to show to both Russia and Ukraine that the cost of going on with war is much higher than the gain if they stop the war. And how can this be done? Well, basically, it's purchasing peace. Again, I know this does not sound very pleasant, but purchasing is part of it. How much could Russia earn, from stopping the war at this point? How and where? And the where is not necessarily gaining land from Ukraine, which unfortunately, certainly, some land will be gained by Russia in order for Russia to make peace. But there are other interests that are so important to Russia around the world. For example, in the Middle East or in the South Caucasus. And, it's all these areas where Russia holds interests play a really important role in determining if and how that calculus can be shifted to show Russia has a lot to gain with third-party concessions and with other European and American concessions and, some kind of agreement. So, basically, this is how it works. Now, the great problem, the great drama is how do you go from paper to practice?
Well, thank you both so much for being with us and sharing your insights and opinions.
Thank you, Andy.
And thank you for watching. That's all we had for you in this edition of Context. But do stay tuned to AnewZ.